generally believe that, anything is possible with the right mindset. I went and spoke to the tribal elders and sat down, shared coffee with them, shared bread, and it was all about communication and respect, showed them that we were no threat, who we were, what we were doing, and we just got an easy passage through. So I tend to use that everywhere I'm in the world. I wouldn't just turn up on the beach and start waxing the board. I would probably have made sure that those that needed to know and just get that that agreement in place.
Dean Stott is a former soldier for the SBS, the Special Boat Services in the British military. He's a Guinness World Record holder, an author, a motivational speaker, and of course a long-time surfer. Dean has lived quite the life, and Dean has a very, very strong sense of self-belief, and it really comes across here, and it's with great pleasure that I share with you my conversation with Dean.
How did you first discover surfing?
My father, actually. We grew up I went to school just south of London, and so every summer holiday we would go down to Newquay in Cornwall. So my father would hitch up the caravan and we'd head down there. And I remember I was quite young, I was about 11 or 12 on our first holiday down there. And just straight away, it was just fascinating just watching people in the water. My father then bought us both, myself and him and my two sisters, some bodyboards. But then I could almost see the distinction between bodyboarders and surfers at an early age. So the following summer, we went down and my father bought one surfboard between the family to see how we get on. And we were all hooked, me, my sisters and my dad. So he then bought us a surfboard each. And yeah, every summer holiday we would spend down in Newquay. I went to college in 1994. I want to get this right. I'm getting old now. 93 or 94. And on the summer holidays, Newquay was almost like the Ibiza or the Vegas of UK. Very popular with young teenagers. So my friends were like, "Oh, we're going to go Newquay for a couple of weeks." And I said, "Perfect." I was thinking more to go surfing, whereas they were thinking more of a boozy holiday and meeting girls. So they would get drunk in the evenings and be hungover in the day. So I'd go have a paddle in the water. And I met this Norwegian surfer, a guy called Jan, and him and I just got chatting. And he was telling me how he's having a gap year from college, and he was a silver service waiter at Fishel Hotel, which is on the peninsula. And back in 94, he was earning £30 a day. So he'd get his breakfast for free. He'd serve breakfast, surf all day, and then repeat the process in the evening. And he got £30 cash a day. It was only £10 to stay in the hostel. So he was making £20 a day surfing and being fed. So he said, "Do you fancy it?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" So he lent me a suit, and then I started doing that with him. About a week later, when my father came down to pick us up, this is long before mobile phones. My friends were there and I wasn't. And they said, my dad's like, where's Dean? And he said, "Oh, he's staying here." And so my father took them back to Surrey. And then 6 months later, my father came looking for me because I'd just given up on college and just spent my time in Newquay. He found me working in one of the surf shops down there. And so, he was displeased with my choice in life. And he said, "What are you going to do now?" And to silence him, my father was a military guy. And I said, "Well, I'll join the military." And he said, "You last 2 minutes." And so that was it. That was how I sort of ended up joining the military. But it was from my time in surfing. I actually always wanted to be a fireman. That was it. That was always my child ambition. But that shift in deciding to go surfing and living in Newquay to then silencing my father, that's how I started my military career.
What was it about surfing that grabbed you?
I don't know. I always remember one day just sat there and I was just watching the waves, just carried on just watching the waves. Even when there wasn't surfers there, I think it was more of an appreciation for the water. And I also felt comfortable being in the water. And this sort of shaped my career as well in the military. I'm known as the Frogman. And it's, my whole career was based around water. And it was from that early age, just having a real appreciation to it. I do remember even younger, going on holiday as a very young kid. I'm talking 4 or 5 years old, and I had a near drowning accident in the swim pool in south of France, and but that didn't put me off water at all. Again, I think it was just that real love for it. I can't explain. Obviously, you're a surfer, and most of the listeners are surfers. It's just a different. You feel like you can escape from the rest of the world when you're just floating around in the water, either on the surface or under the surface. So yeah, I just felt comfortable in water.
Interesting. And you say you had a near drowning experience, and it didn't like, did it do the opposite? Did it almost make you want to face that fear more?
Yeah, I think I just got pulled out the pool, and then I just literally I was pushing the boundaries. I was too young. I didn't have any armbands, and I just went into the deep area when I shouldn't have. And it was like, but the best thing to do is face your fears as well. We do it in the military. If you have an incident, maybe for example, skydiving, you have to pull your reserve or whatever. The best thing to do is not dwell on it; it's to get back up. Because and that's what my father did with that experience. Rather than sort of take me to the side, just put me back in the water. It was almost like, but spent a little bit more time with me. But yeah, it could have had the totally opposite effect, and really been at a negative in my life. But no, I just felt comfortable in that environment.
But to go from like dabbling in the ocean, every summer holidays, to then just like, I know I'm going to stay here and work part-time in a restaurant just so I can surf. And back then, the wetsuits were okay, but they weren't great. There wasn't that many surfers around. And like that's dedication, that compared with, someone living in Orange County who's just paddling a soft top out in warm water. It's quite a big, it was different back then.
Yeah, exactly. Atlantic waters aren't as inviting as the waters here off the Orange County, but yeah, I just think it was, for me. And also, I wasn't a great surfer at the time either. In that short period of time, I really saw my capabilities changing. I was doing a lot more and things like that, and I was also being surf fit. It's like being bar fit or cycling fit. The more you spend doing it, the fitter you are. And then you also, I think as well, as you touched on, the cold waters, that probably also did help me a lot in my military career as well, because it was, something. It is quite menacing when you have to dive into the Scottish waters or the Irish Sea. But actually, from a young age, I sort of really knew that I could cope in those environments. It probably put me in good stead for later on in my military career. It's only now that we're chatting, I think, oh yeah, that might have been a contributing factor.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is like, what did you learn from surfing that you took with you into the military?
That you're never going to be great at the start. It takes time. Be resilient. I think also, I think for me, it was just the fact that I always still believe that anything's possible. As a young boy, I used to watch these guys on the waves of the back. I could never do that, and I just knew that over time, you're not going to be the best, but you can build yourself up. So for me, like, anything's possible. But also, I think with the surfing was almost like the community. That's what I saw, was more, and it's almost like being in a team, and that was very relatable to the military as well, because you tend, whether you go surfing on your own, you're still very much welcomed within the community, or whether you're surfing with your friends. So I saw that that was probably my initial introduction to that camaraderie, which was then taken on into the military as well.
And then what did you learn from the military that affected your surfing life?
Oh, I was very fortunate in the military. I lived in Germany. I got posted to Germany first for a year. Then I was thinking about it yesterday. I've lived on the coast for the last 25 years. Every posting I had in the military was by the water. But I think, again, I joined the military. My father told me I'd last 2 minutes, which was my fire in my belly. But I was about 65 kilos and 5'7" at the time, and obviously now 90 kilos and 5'11". I was growing and getting more confident in the military, in my abilities, and that was also being reflected in the water as well. It's like, that whole thing, you can't, and you look at others and sort of compare yourself to others, and it's like, well, why not? And yeah, and I obviously got a lot fitter within the military, joining the commandos, the airborne, and things like that. And then obviously going to special forces, and actually having a real, even more of an appreciation for the water, especially being a frogman as well. And really, for me, is how, when we're doing a lot of military planning, how water affects our plans, high tides, low tides, sea states, and things like that. It's not just surfing, it's actually what we're doing operational wise. That sea has a real impact on what we're doing as well. So there's some synergy there, there's some crossover. And it used to be frustrating sometimes when you're flying over in the helicopter and looking down and you're seeing the surf and just wishing, I was in there. I've experienced that many times in the military and since as well, that I'd love to just dive in. But again, what the military then gave me was an opportunity to surf in places I never had an opportunity to when I was when I was a civilian as well. So that did help as well.
Yeah, I imagine you've surfed places that not many people have surfed.
Yeah, as we touched on earlier, no example here in Camp Pendleton, which for the listeners separates almost Orange County to Oceanside, a huge US Marine Corps base. And as you drive down the 5 towards San Diego or coming up, you look over to your left or right and you see that coastline and you think, oh, I'd love to get in there. And there's some great breaks. But obviously, unless you're in the military, you can't access that. So in 2005, we had a training exercise, and the final day we had this barbecue, and I borrowed one of the guys' boards, jumped in the water, and very surreal sort of looking back, because you could see there was guys doing water jumps, so parachuting into the water. There was helicopters taking off. Yeah, it was almost like being an extra on Apocalypse Down. But yeah, that's probably one of the most unique places I've been able to surf that probably others couldn't. But also Somalia, having left the military, working in the private security sector, Somalia's got a great coastline, but obviously because of the security issues, not many people surf it.
Are you planning a surfing trip there or something? I heard it on one when I was doing my research.
I'm looking at surfing the coast of Somalia and literally going from the north to the south, just because because of the security issues. There's beaches there, there's breaks with no names. It's known as the most dangerous place in the world to surf. But having obviously worked there and being in that industry, I feel a lot more safe. I have some great contacts as well. But really, and because of the fact of the piracy and things that comes with that, it hasn't been commercially fished for years. So actually, not only above the water we'll be surfing, but also below the water, there's such a vast array of marine life. But some of these countries are sort of tarnished with one brush. Back in the 70s, it was very popular tourist resort was Somalian coastline, and having been there, it's like I want to almost share that with the world as well. Is like, don't just assume Somalia and think piracy and Black Hawk Down. Actually, what it's got is an amazing coastline and an opportunity when things do get better, that people may want to surf there one day.
Yeah, that sounds risky but fun.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm open to any guests that want to come along with me.
Okay, I'm wondering. It makes me think there's some pretty rough places in New Zealand, and there's some places where you just don't surf. Like if you parked up and you started suiting up, some locals might come over to you and say, "Nah, bro, you can't surf here."
Yeah.
If you were in that situation, what would you do?
Well, what I tend to do, I don't go into anywhere without more intelligence led. I would have a local fixer, and also I would have already had that cleared and the discussion done before I start rolling in. But and that's what it is. When I do a lot of stuff in the security industry, it's really interesting. So I don't know where I single-handedly evacuated the Canadian embassy out of Libya on my own, 18 military and 4 diplomats, which sounds like sexy in Hollywood, but never needed any weapons. It was actually all about communication and showing respect to the locals. The British embassy got shot at the week before at the checkpoints. And so I went out, rather than talking to the guys with the weapons, probably similar to your guys in New Zealand, I went and spoke to the tribal elders and sat down, shared coffee with them, shared bread, and it was all about communication and respect. Showed them that we were no threat, who we were, what we were doing, and we just got an easy passage through. So I tend to use that everywhere I'm in the world. I wouldn't just turn up on the beach and start waxing the board. I would probably have made sure that those that needed to know and just get that sort of that agreement in place.
Where does that come from? Like, what's your intention and your approach? Because most people obviously are going to think, like, let's use the example of, okay, let's get the an embassy out of a rough situation.
Yeah.
Now, most people are going to assume that you're Liam Neeson and you're armed to the nines and you're going to have to do a run for it. Whereas you're like, no, let's just talk to the right people. Like, do most people just not have the balls to do that? Like, and what's your thinking and your approach?
Yeah. So the approach to that, sort of going back slightly, because I've just told you the end bit rather than the prior. So when I got out of the Special Forces, I went to Libya and soon identified, it was during the Arab Spring, that they didn't want it being another Afghanistan or Iraq. But also that these, I call them the big five, the largest security companies in the world, were charging seven-figure sums for crisis management and evacuation plans, which weren't actually in place. So I was trying to find a niche within the industry. There was a huge proliferation of weapons at the time. So I bought 30 weapons off the black market and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt and designed my own evacuation plans. So it wasn't I didn't have weapons, I just didn't need them. I did have them strategically placed along the country should we have them. But for me, it's almost about, I think Hollywood doesn't help matters when it comes to special forces. Everyone sees all these movies and they see people blown through the wall and things like that. It's called offensive action. The special forces, that's 25% of what we do. And that's almost the last resort. That's the last resort we should go to. 50% of what we actually do within the special forces is support and influence. It's hearts and minds. It's being embedded with the locals, understanding the demographics, the politics, the tribal influences. But that doesn't look sexy on Hollywood. And so it's from that, my time in the special forces, understanding that is what I then put into the security industry. It wasn't the fact that we didn't have weapons, we just didn't need them. And we make the judgment on the ground. And if it did go 180, then at least we knew we had something in place. So it's knowing when to and when not to.
Let's say I employ you. I say, I want to surf this break. We want to get some footage there. Now, if I tell you, if I turn up if I just turn up, I'm either going to get approached by one of the locals saying, no, you're not going. Yeah. Or if I manage to paddle out, I'm going to come back and my car's either not going to be there or it's not going to have wheels on it.
Yeah.
With that little bit of information, how are you going to help me to surf that?
Yeah, so what I would do is I would obviously get local knowledge. So what area is it? Who is the tribe or who are the locals that you are concerned about? Who's the one who has the power? And who is the right person to speak to there? And then, you may not get away with it, but it's almost like coming in and just saying, look, this is what we want to do. These are our intentions. Ask them almost why it is they understand from their side. So rather than one way telling what it is we want, understand why it is you can't do it. Because there may be some middle ground. They may say, actually, no, we just don't want you surfing there. You can go up to the break, at the other end of the beach. So it's almost a two-way conversation. And then, don't get me wrong. When I have my fixers in Libya and Somalia, sometimes we do pave their hands with a few dollars as well. So it's just showing that. But it's actually the fact that they will probably be impressed that you've at least reached out and offered to speak to them rather than just tipping up in your car and throwing your board in the water. And that's what it is. It tends to be just a lot of respect. And it may be like, well, why don't you guys come paddle with us? Give them something as well. So it's not just a one-way transaction, it's two ways as well.
That's a good point. It's as simple as like, if you know the risks, you want to find out why that risk exists and respect their reasons. Even if their reasons don't make sense to you, you have to find out why and try and empathize with them.
That's it, yeah. And then if it doesn't work, then find some common ground, find somewhere else. Like I said, they may open up and say, well, actually, there's a great little cove around the corner which you probably never knew about. So, we've had it before. It's just understanding the ground truth. as well is why. There's always a why. Why is it, or why is it we can't do it? So.
Have you ever had any, let's say, political situations in your surfing life?
Ooh, in my surfing life.
Any rough
not
locals?
really No, not really. No, I've been very fortunate. I always blame myself being notorious. Australia, Bali. I'm trying to think where I've had it. No, I've been very, very lucky. I think sometimes I'm luckily I'm a size where I look like I can look after myself. A lot of people think I'm a UFC fighter. So probably like just stay away from Shrek. It's like that. No, but I've been very fortunate. But again, tend to be when I go to places like Australia, Bali. I've done South Africa. I've gone with a local, and that always helps things as well. Having that local knowledge is key. Rather than just going in on my own. And so, and going back to your reference to your place in New Zealand, is having that local knowledge. Maybe have one of those guys with you, and that's what I would do if I was in the water. I would make sure one of those guys was looking after your car.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I've been very, very fortunate that I haven't had any sort of political things, especially coming from being a Brit. Our history isn't that great around the world. From what we. I give an example. I ended up training the Kurdish Special Forces, and I pulled my team together. We went to Kurdistan, and we were in this auditorium, and the general was giving this presentation, and he was telling us about the origins of Kurdistan until the Brits came along and split the country into four. So sometimes you're like, sometimes you can feel the burn in the back of your head. But no, I've not had that in the water, luckily, but I have had it on land.
Okay. Frogman, what's the origin and meaning of that term?
So when you Google Frogman, it tends to be the combat divers. So I joined the Royal Engineers. My father was in the Royal Engineers, so I just followed his sort of path. In the Royal Engineers, I then became a commando, so worked alongside the Royal Marines. Again, I just wanted to be near the water. But within the Royal Engineers, we also have combat engineer divers. So we can do everything that we can do on the water, on the surface, sorry. So whether it's concreting, whether it's chainsaws, whether it's, all these hydraulic tools, explosives, we do that underwater. And I then decided I was going to UK Special Forces. And coming from an army background, you primarily will go to the SAS, which is the Army Special Forces. The SBS was the Naval Special Forces and was 100% Royal Marines. But because of my background, my love for the water, and the fact that the SBS just walk around in blue shorts, T-shirt, Oakleys and Reefs, I was out. That's more suited to me. But they'd only, for the first time in history, they'd open the doors that you could come from the army. And so that's what I did. I went on selection, and I was one of the first army candidates to pass for the special boat service from the army. And I think now 15% are from the army background. But I always remember going there thinking they're all divers in the SBS. So, we start at a level playing field. And they're not. They are still new divers. They don't dive until they pass selection, whereas I had 10 years of diving experience behind me. So I ended up very quickly becoming like the dive rep for the squadron, the senior diver. And then it's like anytime there was any sort of diving exercise or operations, I wouldn't even go look at the board to see whose name on it. It was me all the time. And then, since now becoming a public figure, I get the question like, what's the difference between such and such or Bear Grylls and you? And it's like, I'm the Frogman. I was the one who was always in the water.
That must have served you in your surfing life as well a lot, being comfortable in the water.
And that's what I mean. I think those early years of surfing and just falling in love with the water really it actually carved my path in the military as well. I had the choice when I was in Germany, so I had to go to 9 Parachute Squadron, which are based in Aldershot, or to 5-9 Commando, who are based in North Devon on the coast where the surf was. I was boom, straight in. Now that was my decision to go Commando rather than airborne, and then spent 8 years there on the coast just surfing all the time. And I remember joining a reconnaissance troop, and I got the whole troop into surfing as well. So literally our day would be geared around what the swell was like. But we used to have back in the military on a Wednesday afternoon, it was called a sports afternoon. So you could play a sport that was recognized within the unit. So me and my friends used to go surfing, and the sergeant major was like, that's not a recognized sport. So we then set up 5'9" Commando surf team and made it as a recognized sport. And we used to go out every Wednesday afternoon with the 5'9" surf team. And then a few of the guys then went on and represented the army in the tri-services. So yeah, so actually, was bringing the sport into some of the units as well.
Oh, very cool. Aside from surfing, like what are you most passionate and excited about in your life at the moment?
There's a few things. A lot's happened in my life since I left the military. I got injured out of the military, after 16 years. It wasn't something I'd planned. And then obviously went on into the security industry. After evacuating the Canadian embassy, I decided I wanted a new challenge. I always like to have a challenge. I always like something to sort of physically and mentally, engage me. And so my injured leg now is 2 kilos lighter than my good leg. And I was about a month before my 40th birthday, and I said to my wife, I said, I've always fancied doing a world record. And she said, well, what in? And I just started cycling because cycling wasn't hurting my knee. And so I said, I'm going to do a world record in cycling. My wife then found the world's longest road from southern Argentina to northern Alaska. So having never cycled before, I applied for the world record and sort of focused my attention on that, trained for a year. And yeah, broke the world record was 117 days. I did it in 99 days and became the first man in history to do it on 100 days. We raised $1.3 million for mental health. So I like to take on challenges, especially sports that I've never done before, and find out what the biggest challenge is. So for me, I although I enjoy surfing is probably the only sport really that stayed with me from a young age. There's other sports I'm now getting into, like kayaking and stuff. Again, that love for the water, but still learning new skill sets. But I'm also got still doing a lot of security stuff in the background, not so much smuggling people across borders myself. My book's getting launched in the US this year, doing a lot of TV now as well. So we've got some big projects which are all under embargo at the moment. So really multi-hyphenated, but just something for me, something that I can focus on and train for. And I need to be that physically active. But again, with San Clemente just down the road, if there's a lull in my life, I just throw myself in the water. Yeah,
interesting. So you like to throw yourself into things that are difficult.
Yeah, I like to get outside my comfort zone. I obviously know from my time in the military that I have that sort of the right mindset. A lot of it I talk about is the importance is actually the planning, as we've touched about here already. But yeah, I like to test myself. I like to, one of my things throughout my whole life really is I like to prove people wrong. My father telling me I'd last 2 minutes, I was like, okay, then became the first, and people telling me I couldn't go to the SPS, from the army, and then doing that. People telling me there's no way you're going to be able to cycle the world's longest road, and then smashing it by 17 days. It's like, I like to have a challenge. I'm obviously an individual who you can't just go buy a bike and join the cycling club. It's like, I like to have an objective. I always like to have something that I need to be aiming for, but also conscious I'm 45 years old now. I'm no spring chicken. And with a young family, we have a daughter of 11, a son of 6, one on the way in September. I'm also conscious that I'm not away as often. For me, I've really struggled in the past to balance in the yin and the yang. It's always gone one way or the other. And so, yeah, I'm really just trying to find that fine balance that I can still be busy, but also spend time with them. And get them.
Where does that self-belief come from? Like, because it's one thing to be motivated, by people telling you can't not to, but underneath all of that, there is a certain amount of self-belief, right?
Yeah, there has to be obviously some resilience built up. My father, as we touched on, when he was the army football manager, player, and coach, so he was what we would call a tracksuit soldier in the military. So all I saw my father doing was playing football. So he's very competitive. So from a young age, there was really a competitive streak in the family. Even Christmas Day, the ball game at night was like, that's a big thing. But the self-beliefs really came from when I joined the military, I think. I didn't look beyond basic training. I just thought, well, I'm doing basic training. I finished that, and then it was like the next stage. And then I found myself in Germany playing football, very similar to my father. And then I decided to go in commandos. But each time I was doing it, I then realized I was growing physically, but also mentally. And I could see myself actually that I wasn't in line with everyone else. I was actually ahead of them. I was a lot fitter than them, and I was getting fitter and fitter. And so I was getting more confident with my abilities. And it's like, well, what's next? What's next? And really sort of pushed myself to that fact that I then went special forces, but then it was continuing that. So obviously that gave me a lot of self-belief, and confidence. And I just generally believe that, anything is possible with the right mindset, planning, and also the right team around you. I wouldn't be able to have done that bike ride. I wouldn't be able to do half the things I'm doing now if I didn't have my wife around me. Well, my wife is the brains. She manages me, she runs the businesses and stuff like that. I generally believe anyone can break a world record if you've got someone looking after the kids, you've got someone covering the mortgage, doing the businesses, and all you have to focus on is your challenge. And so I'm very fortunate to have that support network. And I think that's also, helps as well alongside my self-belief and resilience.
You mentioned the injury. Now you basically sounds like you tore pretty much every piece of soft tissue around your knee. I mean, that's a horrific injury. How did you come back from that mentally? I mean, that obviously knocked you for six physically, but emotionally, you had to basically become a different person, right?
Yeah, well, I for the listeners, I was doing what was a hey-ho jump, high altitude, high openings. The parachute opens in the air. It's attached to the aircraft. And I'd done hundreds of these jumps before. It was like the third jump of the day. But this one, my leg got caught in the line above my head. And so I was frantically trying to pull my leg off the line, and I couldn't. Yeah, and it pulled my leg up and over my head. So I tore my ACL, my MCL, lateral meniscus in the knee, but also my hamstring, my calf, and my quadricep as well. So all the supporting muscles as well. So it was just floppy. But yeah, I did 16. I'd been in the military 16 years. I also, prior to that, had grown up in the military environment. My father in the military. So all I ever knew was that lifestyle. To then be told, thank you for your time, time to move on. So on reflection, again, luckily for me, my wife Alana was very entrepreneurial and sort of picked up all those other sort of distractions that I needed. I know, running the accounts and who am I going to be banking with? I didn't know who what gas bill I was paying in the military. I didn't care. I was doing a job that I loved. But I did go through what, only on reflection now, was an identity crisis. Gone from working in a tight-knit unit, knowing what we were doing day in, day out with like-minded individuals. And we knew what we were doing for the next 2 years, week by week. There was plans to now, where do I now fit in society? My skill sets, where can I use these? But on a personal level, was my identity, I got to where I had been in the military through my physical robustness. I couldn't even now run 100 meters without tripping over. And so, I really did struggle in those early days. And then to add to the pressure as well, my wife was 8 months pregnant when I left the military. And it's like, is there any work out there? Am I going to be able to support the family? So within 48 hours, I went out to Libya during the Arab Spring. And thankfully, yes, there was plenty of work for me. But then from me leaving the military to the Canadian embassy, that was 5 years. And I just was so fixated on being able to work, support my family, that I'd neglected my own physical and mental well-being, and also my family. I think the last year I was only home 21 days in a 365-day calendar. I'd really disconnected from society. So this is when the second pin had dropped. I soon realized I was trying to match the adrenaline rush I had when I was in the special forces without coming to terms with the fact that you'd actually left. So I hadn't really addressed the fact that I'd left the military. I just kept myself busy doing quite dangerous jobs in the civilian sector, but knowing that I didn't have a support network. If it all went wrong in Libya, I didn't have 35 guys jumping out of a plane to come get me. You were on your own. So that was the turning point in my life, which is why we then decided to do a bike ride.
Hmm. Interesting. What's do you have like when things are feeling like too much, and you know it's easy to get down, and you know the human mind often you know goes straight to the negative. Is there a mantra that you say to yourself to keep the faith and the self-belief?
Yeah, I have a couple of mantras. One, well, I'm a big on with the bike ride. I think I touched on. We raised $1.3 million, and that was for mental health. And when I was doing the challenge, what is the message you're promoting? And I was a real believer in physical activity helps your mental state. So I always find if I'm feeling low, I just go do something. I get, just feel physically active. A perfect example. A good friend of mine. He was in the military with me. He's now a teacher in the UK, and during the Christmas period, he went on a bit of a down as well. He went to his doctor, and his doctor's like, "Well, what's happened? What anything changed?" And he said, "Well, I'm a school teacher. We're on Christmas holiday. I normally run into work. There's your answer. He goes, put your trainers on." That was it. That was the magic fix. So, yeah, I'm a big believer that if it is low, find out, especially people that are physically active, is just get active. I'm not saying go cycle 14,000 miles. That's ludicrous. But give yourself something to train for. And that's why I always think that's why I like to have something short term and not to train for, just to keep yourself busy. But my sort of mantra I use is anticipation is worse than participation. A lot of people would tell you why they can't do it. When people are talking about, if I was to say to someone on the street, tomorrow you're going to do the Orange County, next week you're going to do the Orange County Marathon. They'll tell me every reason why they couldn't. And so for me, it's like, I mean, when they do it, eventually they'll look back and think, actually, it wasn't that bad. I used to do that a lot with my students in the military. They used to overthink things or compare themselves, for example, to others because they had bad experiences. Don't do that, And then actually, when you speak to them afterwards, they look back on reflection and say, actually, it wasn't actually that bad.
I like that. What was it again? And anticipation is worse than participation.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a bit like when you want to go surfing in Newquay in the winter. You don't want to get in, but actually afterwards, it wasn't too bad. Well, I don't know.
You never regret a surf.
No, exactly. Yeah, no, but it's a great mantra.
I really like that. I got an open-ended question for you. It doesn't have to be necessarily surfing related. What's the best advice you've ever had and the worst advice you've ever had?
Ooh. I think the best advice I got was a friend of mine called Ozzy. He said, "Make your own luck." He said it won't come to you. You need to make your own luck. And I didn't really see it in the military, but I did see it when I became a civilian. It's like I see a lot of people ask me these questions, but they see me doing these great things, but they don't see the hard work and the effort that goes in the background. So make your own luck is probably one of the best ones I had. One of the worst ones. I don't think there's nothing that jumps out because I believe, even if it was a bad one and I did it, I learned from it. I always say you can't be experienced without experiences. So whether it was bad advice or not, I probably learned from it anyway. So there's nothing, unfortunately, that's jumping out.
So you're a parent as well?
Yes. Yeah.
How are you helping your children to have a good sense of self-esteem in this current climate?
Yeah, they don't do social media. I think social media is that's affecting a lot of mental health as well. When you're comparing yourselves to others. And for me, it's just find yourself. My daughter actually this week is doing lifeguard training down in Dana Point. And so, and I am also concerned, like I had a great career in the military, but I was always looking to please my father. It was always, to get sort of some respect from him. And I worry that, I've done some great things in my life. My wife's done some great things that our children don't feel like they're also under that pressure as well. So for me, it's like, go do what you want to do. You will have our support. I talk about, I do a lot of international guest speaking. My opening line is that my father told me I would last 2 minutes. The fact I still talk about that 27 years later is the power of words. So I'm also conscious of that, is what I say to my children. Yeah, if you want to do it, do it. Even if I don't agree with it, and hopefully they'll change their mind later on, but never hold them back, and just always let them believe that anything is possible. Anything is possible with the right mindset and support. So, but as a parent, and I see my friends parenting as well, it's very different from your parents, the way parents parented you. You learn from what was good and what wasn't, and then you pass that on to your children.
Anything's possible. Is that something that your father taught you as a child, or is that something you learned from the military?
I mean, something I learned from the military and beyond. Like especially in the special forces, when we're training, we train, we rehearse. You can't plan for every scenario, but you go in there with a mindset that, yes, it may not be done before. It doesn't mean it can't be done. I like the one I use is anything is possible. I said, no, nothing is impossible. It just hasn't been done yet. And that's how yeah.
No, that's good too. Yeah.
Because I think that's the first thing to overcome. If you believe, I generally believed I was going to do that bike ride. So if I believe, then everything else should flow. But as soon as you have doubts, then that will then affect everything else. Yeah.
Are you working on a new challenge at the moment?
I'm doing a big TV show, which involves me being physically fit, going around the world, which will be interesting. So that's my short-term goals. My long-term is, when I finish the bike ride, I wanted to kayak the River Nile, the world's longest river. It's never been done before from source to sea. And so for me, the attraction for that was, I love Africa. Spent a lot of time working in Africa. It's probably my favorite continent. A new sport. Yeah, I've done a bit of kleppering in the SBS, but I haven't done any like 4,200 miles of kayaking. There's other, unlike the bike ride, you've got issues such as hippos, crocodiles, civil war in South Sudan. So for me, it was the perfect challenge. COVID obviously hit, and then we looked at doing it again. But we're when I reached out to some of the sponsors and some of the production teams, the big ones that we're chatting to, they love the idea. But we're in an environment where it's like, it doesn't matter how many millions you've raised for charity or how many world records you've got. It's like, how many Instagram followers you have? Is that really? And it's like, so I actually see that I'm in a world which is a bit normally quite taboo for me, which is social media. So the sort of plan over the next 18 months, and these TV shows that we're doing are going to be huge. That they will raise that profile, and then once we finish them, it's like, well, now let's do the Nile. You've got more eyes on you, which helps for sponsorship, but also from a philanthropy angle, you can raise more money as well, because there's more eyes on you. So that's the plan. It hasn't gone away. It's just been shifted to the right.
Very cool. You have you're doing something now that involves you being physically fit, but you had that injury that you described, like tearing everything around one of your knees. That would most people would just, okay, desk job from now on. Like, realistically, how long did it take you to recover from that injury? It must have been years.
Yeah, well, when I got injured, there was a spiral of errors in the military at the time. From my injury to me actually getting operated on was 44 weeks. So it totally deteriorated. And then I found myself in the civilian industry. So again, I sort of neglected my physical well-being. When I came back from the Canadian Embassy, my injured leg was 2 kilos lighter than my good leg because of the muscle wastage. And so when I did the bike ride, I got the muscle mass back. I think there's 14% less power in my hamstring, but I then got a lot fitter. I'm not at the running that I was in the military. I could probably do a marathon, but I'd probably have to sort of rest it for 2 weeks later because it's swollen up. Whereas when I was in the military, I'd probably do a marathon day after day and not worry about it too much. So it's not so much that, and mentally I know that I can do things, so I don't worry too much. It's more the recovery on things. So I try and do stuff. For example, the bike ride was perfect. It was low impact. kayaking is low impact. So I try and avoid the knee area, but if I have to, I can still run.
You have a very strong sense of hope and self-belief. It's quite rare. It's pretty awesome. It's infectious.
Yeah, it is. I think I raised the bar, and the problem I have is I need to raise the bar again. But you've also got higher to fall as well. Yeah. But I'm conscious of my age. I'm 45, but I know that your endurance peak in life is between 40 and 50. That's when your endurance peak is. I'm in that area. I'm not the fittest, but I'm at that. And it's not because you are fitter, it's because you're wiser. You probably surf a lot different from when you were younger, because you know what to look out for. From previous experiences. As I say, you can't be experienced without experiences. And all I've done is I've taken all those sort of experiences and I just put them into a new sport. But then also learn from the experts as well. I'm never naive to think that I can do it myself. I sort of learn from those experts and their knowledge and sort of get through it.
Yeah. Well, you've lived a hell of a life, and as listeners have probably gathered, you've got some more stories behind you. But I'm going to point my listeners in the direction of the Jolo Willink podcast you did, if they want to get more into that. There's no point us repeating that here. But I want to thank you for your time, Dean. And if the listeners here, a lot of them, because surfing's so difficult, and there's a lot of frustration and a lack of self-belief. What's one message you could leave those surfers with before we sign off?
Everyone started somewhere. Kelly Slater would have had it in his day as well. We all start from somewhere. I'm the carved out version of a younger Dean, so don't worry too much. And I think my key takeaway, don't compare yourself to others as well. We're all unique. We're all unique. I had that with the bike ride. A lot of people saying, well, have you seen such and such how he trains, or as that? Yeah, but I'm not that person. I'm me. So, and you are going to have your ups and downs. It's just how you then pick yourself back up. That's the thing. Everyone has their ups and downs. I still have my ups and downs. It's what I do and how quick I brush myself off.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Love that. Thanks, Dean. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
That was Dean Stott, aka the Frogman. You can learn more about Dean and follow him on Instagram at Dean Stott. That's STOTT, and deanstott.com. Links to that in the show notes. And if you want to hear more from Dean, I highly recommend episode 270 of the Jocko Willink podcast. Thanks for tuning in and supporting the show. Over and out.